Hi, my name is Madison Dara, and this is my consequentialism presentation. Consequentialism is the idea whether an action is good or bad depending on the result. In other words, this can be considered an action is right based on a good result and wrong if it leads to a bad result. For an example, if a player breaks a rule to help their team win, a person might judge that action as acceptable because the result was a win, which is positive for the team, even though breaking the rules is usually considered wrong. Greg Popovich is a legendary basketball coach and executive who is known for being the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA. Therefore, I will be using him as my example. Since taking over in 1996, Popovich has led the Spurs to 5 NBA championships and established the team as a model of consistency and excellence, making 22 consecutive playoff appearances during his coaching career. He is also known for his defensive strategies, team-oriented play, and ability to develop talent. Popovich is the most winning basketball coach in NBA history to this day. He is celebrated for his leadership and innovation on and off the court. He is also recognized for his personality and advocacy for social justice issues. In November of 2012, Greg Popovich made headlines when he controversially benched several San Antonio Spurs star players, including Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili. I don't know if I said that right, I'm sorry. During a nationally televised game against the Miami Heat, the Spurs were at the end of a tough trip, and Popovich decided to send his players back to San Antonio to rest rather than play in the high-profile matchup. His reasoning was clear. He wanted to keep the players fresh and reduce the risk of injury and prioritize their team's long-term success, which maintained their health and to get to a deep playoff run, increasing their chances of competing for a championship. So basically, a key statistic that we should keep in mind that I found is that in 2011 to 2012 season for Greg, a lot of his players had an average age of 30 years old. So you're thinking they're kind of getting up there, they've been playing for a long time, and they're playing a high-intensity schedule, which means they're more susceptible to injury. So therefore, Greg wanted to be more innovative with this move that he made. So the specific incident, this was November 29th of 2012, and it was a highly anticipated game of the Miami Heat and sent the Stars home without playing. Again, he rested these players, and it caused a lot of controversy. While his numbers were slightly down from the previous season, the slight reduction in his regular season stats reflects Popovich's load management strategy, allowing Duncan to conserve energy, remain effective in high-stakes playoff games, and maintain consistency even though he's aged. This strategy, despite lowering his regular season averages, kept him fresher for the playoffs, where he played his essential role for the Spurs in the 2014 championship run. So, for an example, performance improvement. When he rested players, they performed better. The 2014 playoffs, Duncan averaged 15.1 points and 9.7 rebounds per game, superior to his regular season averages last year, which was 17.8 and 9.9, with more games. So this proves, even if he benched his star players, they are still performing up to the standards that he wants, like last year. So it was better. And this is the point he was trying to make. The decision, however, did not set well with the NBA. Commissioner David Stern fined the Spurs $250,000, stating that the move deprived fans and broadcasters from a competitive game. Popovich was unfazed by the backlash and stood by his decision, emphasizing that the team's long-term performance and health were more important than one regular season game, which ultimately he was trying to get to the championship game. His approach to the player management has since been widely studied across all players, and he highlighted his commitment to the sustainable success over immediate satisfaction. So as we can see here, there's a little chart of load management, and I kind of wanted to explain this a little bit. So load management is a strategy used in the NBA and all different sports in America to try to limit the physical strain on players by carefully managing their playing time and rest throughout their season. So, as we see more often than before, we see a lot of people save their players when they're maybe high scoring in a game and they want to take them out because they're already going to win by a blowout. So, just keeping them fresh for the future is what is important here, as we can see. Greg Popovich's decision to bench his star players could have negative consequences if it didn't go as planned. This is what we need to think about as the alternative results, because he's kind of taking a chance here back during that run when he decided to bench his key players. So, for one, resting key players during a high-profile game risked upsetting fans, broadcasters, and sponsors who were excited to see the Spurs' best players to compete, and this would potentially damage their reputation. Fans in particular might have felt cheated and maybe developed some resentment towards Popovich, which would have made him a target for widespread criticism. And we can look on places like Facebook and news articles and Twitter, and we can see that fans are upset by what he has done because it was making news headlines because this game was so highly anticipated. And additionally, if the team underperformed later in the season or failed to meet the playoff expectations, critics would have blamed the decision and argued that skipping a chance to build momentum or prove themselves against these top competitors hurt their team's overall rhythm and confidence. So that's another thing that Greg had to keep in mind, was that, yes, he was benching these star players, and because of all this criticism, he was probably hoping that he was, gonna succeed in the future, because if he didn't, this is one example of where his job could be on the line. And his job being on the line, we can keep going and talking about that the hefty fine that was imposed on the NBA, that was given by the NBA for this move that he made. Because of this fine, the fine placed unnecessary financial issues for the San Antonio Spurs, and same thing with public relations and things like that. And if the Spurs had failed to deliver long-term success, and ownership might have questioned Popovich's judgment, potentially eventually putting his job at risk. So even though he did something like this, coaches are always doing things that might put their job on the line, and so they kind of just have to trust their gut and their coaching abilities to make moves like this. So he gambled with the results, and he went for it, and it ended up working in his favor. So here's some of my references that I used, and thank you so much for watching my presentation.